Yes.
Okay.
Well, we are here. Where are you? Here's a little Latin for you. Ad sum. If you're picking someone up and you're at the door or you're down in front in the street, just text your friend ad sum. ADSUM. It means I'm here. And I'm here with David L. Gray. And we're going to talk about Freemasonry today on this live stream. My name is Patrick Coffin. We do this all the time inside Coffin Nation, but once a month we open the doors and you can see what a Ask Away Thursday feels like. We call it Live Stream Hangout. It's simulcast on Facebook and on the YouTube and inside CoffinNation.com, where we talk about the interchange, the interface, you could say, between culture and faith, the sources of truth, which is fundamentally our Lord Jesus Christ and the classical realist tradition. We defend the West. We shore up broken marriages, and we try to do what we can in our sphere to rebuild the culture, which has been so battered and so tossed around. And Freemasonry is one of those destabilizing effects. We're going to talk about the origins of Freemasonry, why Catholics cannot be Masons, by a former high-ranking Mason leader and historian. His name is David L. Gray. He's been on this live broadcast before. He is a convert to the Catholic faith, came into the Church of Rome in 2006. He eventually earned a Master of Arts degree in theology from the Ohio Dominican University and attended my alma mater, Franciscan University. You can check out his other books, The Divine Symphony and Exordium to the Theology of the Catholic Mass. He joins us now from Greater St. Louis, Missouri. Hey, David.
How's it going, Patrick?
It's going great. Good to see you again. I notice people never say, Patrick's from the lesser Los Angeles area. It's always the greater.
Yeah.
Why is that?
What would be the lesser? Would that be Hollywood, or what would that be?
Be like the San Fernando Valley. It'd be like my 818 area code, probably. So, I don't know. I'm bouncing the ball here because I know on your YouTube channel, which I'll send people to, you also do some commentary that is actually funny. I don't know if the name comedian is on your business card, but it should be. You've got some comedy chops there, and I like how you're going in and out of focus too. That's like a magic trick. Amazing.
I better stay still. Yeah. You remember when Pope Francis? Remember that whole thing with him that they thought he disappeared? Remember that not too long ago? At some angles, it looked like he had disappeared.
Oh, was it like a green screen TV effect, or what, was it white on white? Why did he disappear?
No, he was peering in the building, and at some angles, it looked like he just vanished. And so, yeah, I don't know if it's a magic trick or maybe just the angle, but it was very interesting.
Cue the sound of conspiracy theorists ranking.
Yeah,
up.
it was
Right.
it was something else. Yep.
Well, when I've done coming up on 200 episodes of the Patrick Coffin Show, I've done hundreds of commentaries on YouTube, and one of the biggest hits with the most reaction is why Catholics can't be Masons. I don't know what it is about this topic, David. It's just it hits a nerve for people. It's like a third rail. So let me start with some biography on you, just by way of introduction. How did you first become involved in Freemasonry, and how did you get out? So your entrance and exit.
Right. So I had always wanted to be a Freemason. I think for as long as I was a kid. You know, my stepfather was a Freemason. My grandfather was a Freemason, and so when I was a kid, I was going through my father's belongings. This is before I knew what a Mason was. You know, your parents leave the house, you throw a party, or you start ruffling through your parents' things. So I was going through my father's drawers, and so in his bottom drawer, underneath some of his clothes, I found a bag. And inside, it had this book that was all coded, and it had this thing I didn't know was a Masonic apron, and it had a pair of white gloves. And it really just fascinated me. And it was like finding out your dad, is a superhero. Like, man, my dad has a cape. And so as I got older, I found out what that was and found out my grandfather was. So I knew that I had to wanted to be a Freemason. Mm-hmm. And in the community that I was raised, it was just one of those expectations. It was like a status symbol in my community. Like you become a man, you become a Freemason, and it's just one of those things that you did. So yeah, I was in college, my sophomore year. I became a Freemason. I think I was maybe 21 at the time. So I
Mm-hmm.
became a Freemason at a very, very early age. Um, and
Rose through the
I think,
ranks. You had ambitions
yeah,
to
yeah,
leadership.
so I think I caught on pretty fast. People took an interest in me. People liked me, and so they started moving me up. By the time I was 26, I think I was what was called the Worshipful Master of a Masonic Lodge. That's the what's also called the Blue Lodge, the first 3 degrees. So, I think by the time I was 25, 26, yeah, I was a master of a lodge. So
Mm-hmm.
right after I became a Freemason, maybe the year later, I started, I went up the Scottish Rite, became a 32nd. Then I started working my way up the York Rite and the Royal Arch and the Royal Select and the Knights Templar. Went in the Eastern Stars as well, became the highest ranking officer there, became the highest ranking officer in the Royal Arch as well. A little bit after that, a little bit after I was a worship master, I was then eligible to become an appointed officer in the
Mm-hmm.
Grand Lodge. So I got a Grand Lodge appointment, started moving up in the Grand Lodge. So by the time I left Freemasonry, I was called a district deputy, and which means
Yep.
you're the representative of the Grand Master over a particular area of the jurisdiction. So as district deputy, I was in charge of all of Western Ohio. So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty. And a lot of other things. I had written history books and books. I was made a fellow in the Philaxis Society. Um, I went on a lecture tour throughout New Zealand and Australia about my book, and I crossed over into mainstream Freemasonry. I was what was called a Prince Hall Freemason, which is predominantly black. But I was invited
What's the name
into
again? Prince what?
Prince Hall Freemasonry.
Prince Hall Freemasonry. Yep.
Yeah, and so this is the group, predominantly black, but uh, in like the late '90s, I had crossed over as well. I had been invited to become a member of the Grand Lodge of Ohio, their research lodge, and that's predominantly white. So I had my feet in both your Prince Hall and your mainstream
Yeah.
Freemasons. So
Uh,
yeah, that's kind of where I was at until I became Catholic.
we'll get there. I wanted to ask you about the structure of Freemasonry, because it's not one monolithic thing. It's not like the Catholic Church with lay people and deacons, priests, bishops, archbishops, cardinals, pope. Is there a
Right.
pope? Is there an equivalent like with the Mormon Church, or is there like one head honcho that calls shots for all Masons on earth, or is it run by committee? How does the authority structure work?
Yeah, each Grand Lodge is autonomous, independent from each other to a degree. So, the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge, he interprets the Constitution. He makes the rules. Freemasons, tradition is very important. So, in a similar way that we would say that the Church of the Apostles subsists in the Catholic Church today, Freemasons would say, in a sense, that the stonemasons guilds subsist in Freemasonry today, and so, which we can talk about this, but
Yeah.
but from the stonemasons guilds is where you get a lot of the structure in Freemasonry, as far as officers, the masters in charge of the lodge, and then you have your wardens and your deacons, your chaplains. So a lot of the offices, a lot of the membership structure still is some carryover there from the stonemasons guilds. A lot
Yeah.
of signs and symbols. And
Yeah.
so that's the Grand Lodge structure. When people hear you're Freemason, they're saying that you're a Master Mason. You have the third degree of Freemasonry, which properly Freemasonry, that's the highest degree in what is called properly Freemasonry. Just the first 3 degrees, just the lodge degrees. Outside of that, that's when people start referencing things like the 33rd, which is the Scottish Rite, and then the York Rite. And so Freemasons, they wouldn't really consider these higher degrees. They would call these things more exclusive degrees, or more select degrees, or
Yeah.
other degrees, right?
Right.
Outside of Freemasonry, we hear the word 33rd and we say, oh, that's high. No, that's just the Scottish Rite,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the York Rite, it's in different parts of the world, it looks different ways. Is different houses. There's a lot of variation in
Right.
every jurisdiction, throughout you go in the world. But as far as the Grand Lodge and the Scottish Rite goes, it's pretty much consistent. And the important thing also to know about the structure, I would say this lastly, is that the Grand Master is the highest officer in Freemasonry, um, in his jurisdiction, and he's equal with every other Grand Master. So, in all the other rites and houses, such as the Scottish Rite and House of New York Rite, your Knights Templar, and so on, they're dependent upon him for their affiliation. They're a pendant. So, a Grand Master can, and a Grand Master has throughout history at various times, have told the Scottish Rite or the Shriners, I don't want you to be part of my jurisdiction anymore. And they weren't part of the jurisdiction anymore. And every Mason that belonged to those other rites, their membership just stopped being. And so the Grand Master is the most powerful and highest ranking person in Freemasonry, and the Master Mason is the highest degree in what is properly called Freemasonry.
You see this a lot of architect type symbols embedded on temples as you go by in various American cities. In your book, I want to highlight that you've written. It's sort of it's a guide, but it's like a dictionary you'd want to have near you. The Catholic Catechism on Freemasonry, a theological and historical treatment on the Catholic Church's prohibition against Freemasonry and its appendant Masonic bodies. I'll just flash it right here. Great resource. You mentioned the word Freemason. Does it have to do with the material that in the great cathedrals that were built in the post-Protestant revolt era? You had this influx of Masons that weren't building cathedrals anymore, at least in parts of England and Germany, because they became Protestant and buildings became very structurally functional only, without the glorious, Renaissance or Gothic architecture. Is the word Freemasonry? Does it have to do with the materials that they commonly used?
Yeah, in a sense, you're spot on. One reference of a term Freemason references to the word freestone.
Freestone,
right?
That's it.
The stone it was a softer, it was a chalkier type of material, and so it is primarily found in parts of Europe, and that was what a lot of Masons, they were using this stone to build this freestone, right? So that's in one sense where the term Freemason comes from. The other term is that Masons, they had guilds throughout Europe. These were the people who built the cathedrals, the monasteries, the churches, the universities throughout all of Europe. And so when a builder, as a Mason, you could work on a project for your entire life, or you could be a type of person who traveled from job to job. A job completed, you went to the next job. You were
like a free agent,
type of laborer, right? And so you were a Freemason.
Yeah.
So you're a Freemason in a sense. And so members of the guilds, they enjoyed this special privilege of travel and offering their services. And because of that, you were a member of the guild and you were a Freemason, you're recognized as such, that, you had protection where you went, you had safety where you went, you had stability, you had your burial costs covered. And so it was, a true guild system. And so, Freemason would really refer to those two type of terms, of freestone and your ability to travel as a Mason.
Gotcha. We'll get to your Catholic conversion and why you left soon. I wanted to ask you what the beliefs were of Masons. I'm sure some people watching right now who might be just not exposed to what they teach, A, the teaching of the church is, and B, what Masons believe. What's a kind of a compressed summary of Masonic belief, and why is it antithetical to discipleship of Jesus Christ as Catholics?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a there's so many ways you can go with it, but what I liked about, you did a video on Freemasons. I think it was last year or maybe earlier this year, and I thought it was really good, because what I liked about your presentation, that you really just stuck to the facts. You didn't get stuck. You didn't go off into the conspiracies or this and that. You just stuck with the plain matter of the fact. This is what the church teaches. And I think that's really important, because we can get off of conspiracy theories. We could get off into the Masonic ritual and things like that.
Which president was the 33 degree and, on the dollar bill, and you have to, at some point you have to adjust your tinfoil hat. But anyway, thank you. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, and none of that, how you adjust your brain has anything to do with why we can't be a Freemason. Succinctly, that Freemasonry is proposing an alternative truth to salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And what Freemasonry is offering is really self-determinism. It sounds like a lot like Pelagianism. Is that Freemasonry is saying succinctly that these working tools of the operative Mason, if you apply them to your life in a speculative way, you can become a better person. Okay.
Yeah.
On the surface, it sounds like, well, okay, but what they're missing is grace in Jesus Christ. That it's not through the working tools I become righteous or good. It's through Christ and his grace. So Freemasonry doesn't include Jesus Christ or God's grace in the equation of becoming a better man. And so, one of the mantras of Freemasonry is that Freemasonry makes a good man better.
Mm-hmm.
And it does that through the self-determination. And so, as Catholics, we don't believe that. That's
right. But that's true.
What we believe.
But
yeah. So it's through Christ and his grace.
If you don't have that experience of Christ, if your Catholicism is basically a box ticking kind of mechanical Mike relationship to the church, then there's got to be something that draws you to the lodge and to the brotherhood and the community, because it sounds like it's easy for Catholics who have that living relationship with Christ, who love theology, who are all in regarding evangelization, to kind of look down their noses at Masons. Oh, those stupid Catholics, why would they be drawn to that? There must be some goodness there. There must be some practical way of making yourself a little bit better, because people are not going to go for something full-on satanic or full-on, some obviously negative trait as a brand. It sounds to me like the Masonic orders do a pretty good job at advertising themselves as kind of self-help, as a kind of, loyal club of elks or whatever, where you can get away from the wife and the noise of your house and the pressures of the job, and you can meet and you can have your rituals and get ahead in business, kind of network. Maybe if they have sacred texts, it probably sounds a little bit like Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, or Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. In other words, and I want to ask you about these strange rituals and the promises that you make if you break any of the secret protocols. Yeah. But what am I half on the right track in saying there is some self-help principles there that aren't all bad?
Yeah, I like how you touched on that. A person who's not catechized, which is a lot of people who come up with no faith or confused, like I was when I was 21. I never really had Christ catechized to me as a child, and so when I'm in college and what Freemasonry is offering is the secret knowledge that seemed really attractive. Aside from that, though, a lot of the people who I came into the lodge with, and a lot of people who I encountered throughout my time as a Freemason. A lot of them joined Freemasonry just because it seemed like a brotherhood. They knew a friend or family member who's a Freemason.
Yep.
They liked the way Freemasons dressed. Maybe they went to a banquet. It seemed really cool. Maybe they saw the Shriners, ride on little motorcycles, and they found out, well, to be a Shriner, I got to be a Freemason.
Fez hat.
Yeah. And so people had become Freemasons for various different reasons that really don't all the time necessarily have to do with what Freemasonry is going to end up teaching you once you start getting initiated.
True or false? Masonry requires explicit renunciation of the Pope and Christian religion.
Properly Freemasonry, the first 3 degrees, no, you wouldn't see it. I'm trying to think offhand.
Because the great architect. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think maybe there is a degree. I forget which degree it is in the Scottish Rite. That Catholics will have a big problem with. But I'm thinking through all degrees of Freemasonry, you never hear that any explicit denunciation of the Pope or anything like that. No.
Is God the Father? Is the great architect idea of God really a symbol of indifferentism and a kind of natural religion, or some deist entity that created the world but is not personally involved and certainly doesn't love you as God the Father does? Is it kind of a substitute God, the great architect? See what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think, you look at Anderson's Constitution. Back in 1717, and this is the big break here. Heretofore, Freemasonry, the lodge system, like the guild system of lodge, it's like it's very, the guild, these Masons, for the most part, throughout all of history, they had been Catholics until they were Anglicans, right?
Mm.
And so these are the people who built. So man, you look at the members of the lodges. You look at the things they believe. One thing, you look at something that's called Hallowell Manuscript. It's also called the Regis Manuscript, and this is one of the ancient charges, Patrick, that the lodges, they had these charges, these ancient charges that really gave the history of the guild, what they believed, what they stood for, and how a Mason was supposed to guide himself.
Mm-hmm.
And in a Regis Manuscript, just give you a sample of how Catholic these Freemasons were. This is a part of the Regis Manuscript. It says, "Fur and soft, without noise. Jesus Lord, welcome thou be. In form of reed as I see thee. Now Jesus, for thine holy name, shield me from sin and shame. Shrift and Eucharist, thou grant me both, urge that I shall hence go, and very contrition for my sin, that I never, Lord, die therein. And as thou were made born, suffer me never loss, but when I hence shall win return." And so these were your Freemasons, very Catholic. They had a
Catholic
requirement that
it's
they
like
had to.
modernism, Catholic modernists. Kind of word salad. Sounds good, but man, this is complicated.
Right. And so, but this is from the 11th century, 10th century. Okay.
I see. So
now we're moving forward. Yeah, we're moving forward until 1717.
So this is all what you just said, pre-1717, pre-modern Freemasonry. Okay.
Right.
Good.
Now, when we get to 1717, there's this big break. Right. There's this big break when there's this innovation that comes into Freemasonry. Mm-hmm. And these guys get together. They say, okay, let's start a Grand Lodge system. It had never been heard before, a Grand Lodge governing body over independent lodges. But they said, okay, let's start a Grand Lodge. And this in 1717. In 1723, they decided to write a constitution, because it's an organization and needs constitutions, need governance. And so in their constitutions in 1723, it's called Anderson's Constitution. You can, anybody can read it online. But this is when the big break with Freemasonry comes. There's two things I would say here that's going to answer the question about, who is the grand architect of the universe? Is he just some secreted God? Is he a greater God? Is he, who is this great architect of the universe? And I think the Freemasons answered themselves in their Anderson's Constitution. In the first article concerning God and religion, it says this. In ancient times, Masons were charged in every country to be the religion of that country, whatever it was. Yet 'tis now more expedient only to oblige them to that religion which all men agree. Their particular opinions to themselves, that is, to be good men and true, men of honor and honesty, by whatever denomination or persuasion they may be distinguished, whereby Masonry becomes the center of union and the means of conciliating true friendship among persons that remain at perpetual distance.
Yep.
And the second one is the deal breaker. Already, this is problematic that we're talking about. Okay, Freemasonry, your religion is a opinion, and Freemasonry seems to be positioning itself as a greater religion over these subordinate opinions, right? Yeah. They're subordinating Christianity and whatever underneath itself. And this is when another thing that I think is the nail in the coffin. Later on, it's talking about how Masons should behave. And it says that in Anderson's Constitution, Section 6, number 2, it says that we being only as Masons of the universal religion, as mentioned above, going back to the religion that all men agree on, we are also of all nations, tongues, and kindred languages, and so on and so forth. So when we ask the question, well, who is this grand architect of the universe? Well, I think the Freemasons answer themselves, that they've created for themselves this new religion. that
Right.
is greater than every religion that man brings into the lodge.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's the great wheelhouse. It's the overarching umbrella of all. It organizes, so Catholicism is dependent upon it. All the Protestantisms, Eastern Orthodoxy, every other religion is kind of a part of this syncretic melting pot, which is controlled
Right.
and understood in the broadest sense only by Freemasons. Yeah, that lays
Right.
it out pretty clearly. What about the oaths that you hear about? Oaths that you'll, I'm making this up. You'll stick a, stiletto knife in your eye. You will bloodlet if you reveal the secrets at the 33rd degree level. Are these occultic rituals that promise torturous acts? Is that urban legend, or is that what Masons do?
Now the oaths in I think in my book in the appendix section, you probably got to that. You've seen one of the earliest exposés of the Masonic ritual.
If you're just joining us, the live streams with David L. Gray, author of the Catholic Catechism on Freemasonry. He's a convert to the Catholic faith and was a high-level Freemason influencer and writer. What were you going to get to, David?
Yeah, and so in the back of the book, you see one of the earliest rituals, Masonry dissected by Pritchard, and it guides you through some of the questions, answers, in the Catechism of Freemasonry. And regarding oaths, in all Masonic degrees, there is an oath that binds a person to the precepts of that degree, and it swears them to secrecy under the penalty of blah 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 blah. Every degree is different, but it's generally always gruesome. and Pope Leo the 13th, he had a huge problem. I mean, he definitely had a huge problem with the oaths.
He wrote,
Freemasonry.
I want to say, 6 encyclicals on
Yeah,
Freemasonry.
6.
He was also a very
6.
Marian Pope. I want to say 11 encyclicals on the Rosary alone from Pope Leo the 13th.
Yeah.
It's odd that he's not, a servant of God or blessed or Saint Leo.
I know, right?
Yeah. There's actually footage of him. Did you know that? You can see he's the first Pope to be filmed. We're talking like turn of the century. He died in 1903, I believe, and wrote an awful lot. So he was an expert in the principles of Freemasonry.
Yeah. And there was always that rumor. There was always that rumor about him that he may have been a Freemason in his youth. Like a lot of men in Europe had become in their youth. But
that would that would furnish him with a lot of inside info on what the machinations really look like, right? If he's a former insider. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're chugging along and you're a high degree Mason. And at some point, there's a fork in the road, and you realize if you keep reading these Catholic writers and meeting these Catholic people and you become baptized, they're not compatible. What was the reef that kind of broke your Masonic boat? Does that make sense? What was the inciting incident where you realized, I can't have both. I got to pick Jesus Christ and his church or continue in the lodge? Was there one issue that was that crisis point?
No, it was just when I was going through RCA, and I really didn't hear much about it there. But I am listening to EWTN. I'm listening to your show back then. I'm listening to Teresa Tommy on the morning, and one of these shows, maybe a few of them, I'm hearing that Catholics can be Freemasons, and so I began to research this. This is like, wow, I don't know. And so I found out it's true that Catholics cannot be Freemasons. And so it was an easy choice for me because I had become completely convinced that this Catholic Church is Christ's church, that the Holy Eucharist is true, that I can't live my life without it. Yes, I think Freemasonry, I learned a lot from Freemasonry. Some of its principles, seemed applicable to me at the time when I really didn't believe in God. And I had made a lot of friendships, a lot of good relationships.
Yeah.
And, but Freemasonry could only make me a better man. But what the Catholic Church was promising was something eternal. There was opportunity to become a saint. And, well, what else is there?
Brilliant tagline. Yeah. So this is a really important distinction, I think, a difference between the oil that is Catholicism and the water that is Freemasonry, is that no matter what degree of Masonic influence you have, no matter how many of their authors and how many men of virtue that you wanted to imitate, Jesus doesn't just give us a better version of us. We get a new creation. Right? It's not just improvements and additional stories onto the building. It's an inner renewal where we share in the divine nature. We are divinized. No other religion teaches that we are divinized. I guess our Eastern Orthodox brothers do in a different way. Yeah. But that's uniquely Catholic. And that's not the same thing as becoming better at business and influencing people and, becoming better on Wednesday than they were on Tuesday. We're talking a radical transformation, a turning around so that you in the Book of Revelation, behold, a new creation. Was that part of your thinking in finding it easy to let go of Masonry?
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, it's everything that you said was beautiful. I really didn't know. I don't think I knew the word divinization back then.
Yeah, Theodosis. It's awesome.
Yeah. And so I was just a baby, just learning just the basic things. I hadn't even memorized the creed at this type of time. It was just, for me, it was church authority. Mm-hmm. And once I believed that and knew that if I had become I just knew I couldn't have both. I can't, serve God and man, that type of thing. And I knew that I just wanted to be obedient to the church and what the church teaches. And so for me, it was just being a good Catholic and being obedient to what the church is teaching. Yeah.
Did you have Freemason friends or family that wondered, what are you doing? Why are you leaving the lodge? Did you get any flack or pushback?
When there was a time, there was a time when a number of people who I had known when I was a Freemason were struggling with why I can't not be Catholic and a Freemason. Mm-hmm. And you had two responses. One response I still get from Freemasons to this day when I talk to them, that, oh, well, that's just an outdated teaching. That's not anymore. That's just the old dogma. We don't believe that anymore. And then there's a response that, then there's a second response that, who is the Catholic Church to decide? Right.
Right.
So it's from Catholic Freemasons, it tends to be, we don't believe that anymore. But from Freemasons who are not Catholics, well, who's the Catholic Church to decide? You believe in God, so.
Which is a good question.
I lost a lot of people who I thought were really good friends who really don't talk to me to this day. Some do. I still have some people who maybe two or three who are still in my life from that time who I consider true friends. Right.
Well, the question that the non-Catholic Mason asks is a good one. Who's the Catholic Church to decide? Yeah, that's the question. You answer that question, you're going to be in trouble because you're not going to last long in the lodge. If you're knocking, the door's going to open. That's a promise from God Himself.
Right.
I thought you were going to say, oh, that's an old dogma. Catholics can be Masons. And by the way, the church is really talking about European Masonry, not the American, nicer with the Shriners Hospitals and the mini bikes at parades. Cardinal Ratzinger, I believe, later became Pope Benedict XVI, wrote as late as 1983, clarifying that membership in the Masonic Order is it bars you from Holy Communion. So if you're a Mason listening right now, don't believe us. Go to the sources. Check out the Catholic Catechism on Freemasonry and read it for yourself. In the meantime, you might want to not receive Holy Communion because there's a irreconcilable set of principles and teachings. They really are oil and water.
Right. And you even have like Catholics who profess to be Freemasons who want to wrestle with that, right? Because literally, Pope Cardinal Ratzinger says belonging to Freemasonry is a grave sin, grave sin. And it's the type of grave sin, as you say, that bars us from Holy Communion. Now some people may like to say the word excommunication here because it doesn't seem formal. There's no pronouncement from a cleric, but literally
Hmm.
out of
Yeah.
communion with the church. That is what Pope Benedict was saying, that it is a grave sin, and this type of grave sin that breaks your communion
Hmm.
with Christ and his church. And that's why the remedy for Masonic membership is making a good confession and leaving Freemasonry.
Hmm.
So we may not like to call it excommunication, but literally that's what it is.
Hmm. Yeah, our age is an age of therapeutic deism, and our feelings are the highest God. You don't want to hurt someone's feelings. You know who hurt people's feelings? Our Lord. We just had the reading from about the Syrophoenician woman who's asking Jesus for some help, and he ignores her, and then he calls her a dog. I mean, whoa, that's not very Christian, Jesus. But obviously, the truth's more important than how we feel. Getting back to the loss of friendship that you had, that's a really great snapshot of the fact that the Catholic faith asks for a first love. So the phrase, "I haven't come to bring peace but a sword," Jesus says, the context after that, the following verses, has to do with mother-in-law being set against daughter-in-law, son against father, and so on. So it's really family. The thing that you think is your first love can't be. So you have to. Christ has to come first. We've got a bunch of Coffin Nation members here who have got some questions. You want to turn to questions, David?
Yes, that's
All right.
scary. Let's go.
All right. So Matthew David Shadrax, Laurel Canyon. Does that ring a bell? Matthew, what do you mean by Laurel Canyon? Unless it's Laurel Canon, like canon law. Oh, you covered this. Were you Prince Hall or regular Blue Lodge? So you answered that. What about Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma and his declaration of Lucifer and the Gnostic degradation of Adonai? You know about Albert Pike? Did you mention him?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. Albert Pike is someone, especially once you're going into the Scottish Rite, it's definitely someone you encounter. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He was Confederate soldier, fighter, general. I don't know. He has some serious rank there,
Yeah.
brigadier general, something like that. And so he fought for the
Confederate general.
Confederacy.
Yep.
Prolific writer. He was what was called this supreme grand commander of the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite, the sovereign grand commander of the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite. So, and
Yep.
he was really, and he's in his Morals and Dogma, he goes into some really esoteric aspects that Scottish Rite Masons are obligated to believe, are obligated to accept.
Mm-hmm.
But what Albert Pike shows you is the doors to the occult that
Mm-hmm.
Freemasonry opens.
I was just
Right.
going to say the occultic nature of those,
Yeah.
arcane stuff. And it's all subtle. The devil is a very effective liar. And the best lies are the ones that replicate the truth, just enough to be believable, just to get you
Yeah.
in the door.
And those are the ones I find that a lot of people want to hear. They want you to tell them the truth, but they want it to sound like a lie. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's one of the things that's very attractive about Freemasonry and its ethos of having a Bible and an altar, of having offices called deacon and chaplain, and
Yeah.
during the Masonic ritual, you hear church, verses from the Bible and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's very appealing to people who desire righteousness.
Yeah. The liturgical garb, like you mentioned, the white gloves and your father's apron, is the apron used in the rituals, and is it a carryover from the pouch or the apron that an actual Mason would hold his tools in to build?
Yeah, so an operative Mason, he would have used typically a lambskin apron to cover himself, protect himself really from some of the rough stones he was working on. It was thick, it was heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one of those things in Freemasonry. You always take the things the operative Mason is using and you apply some speculative meaning to it. So the operative Mason, he looks at the apron and says, the operative Mason used the apron for this, but Freemasons, were taught to use it for a more noble and glorious purpose. And so the Freemason is taught that the white, this is one of those things that alludes to Christianity and Christ, the white lambskin apron,
Mm.
right? Is a
Mm-hmm.
symbol of purity and innocence. So, and the Freemason, after he dies, maybe he's clothed again with this type of apron. So it's one of those. Yeah, it has that. It's that subsisting in the stonemason guilds.
Yeah.
But it's also used in this building up of making a man better in this syncretic system, this syncretic religion of Freemasonry.
Gotcha.
Syncretic fraternal religion of Freemasonry.
Gotcha. Matthew points out that Pike is the only Confederate general with a shrine. He's buried in D.C. as well.
Yeah, they took a statue down, or they tried to take it down, right? I can't recall.
Well, Antifa take down any statue just because it's a statue. So give them time. He'll get to Pike. What about Tim Johnson asks, how does Egyptian mythology play into Freemasonry? See a lot of the kind of odd hieroglyphs and kind of strange religious concepts. How much of that is informed by the Egyptians?
Yeah, I like to tell people that Freemasonry doesn't have anything original about itself. There's nothing original in Freemasonry. Freemasonry just copies, reinterprets, reimagines, repurposes everything. So yeah, you see a lot of import with the Eye of Osiris, the all-seeing eye.
Is that on the dollar bill? Is this on the dollar bill with the Novus Ordo Secularum, the new world order? Is that a Masonic symbol on American paper currency?
I don't. You mean in Freemasonry it does use the Latin, or does it just use the all-seeing eye? What is the question?
Good question. Let me get a $1 bill here.
Okay.
Yeah, it says, let me put on my high IQ glasses. When I wear these glasses, my IQ goes up. You can actually see it on the screen. It's pretty amazing. See? So, higher IQ. Annuit Ceptus Novus Ordo Secularum.
A new order. Okay,
new world order. Yeah, or new order of the age. And then there's a pyramid, and at the tip of the pyramid is looks like an eye. Yep, all-seeing eye. Yep. Vaguely Masonic. I mean, conspiracy theorists, they go, see, voila, Americans' DNA is Masonic. The whole thing's satanic. I've heard that before too.
I mean, a lot of man, Freemasonry has so much influence in the founding of this country. I mean, from the Constitution itself is a Masonic document. More so, the French Constitution, the Declaration of Man, or whatever that is, that's even more Masonic. There's some crossover with the writers, with Jefferson and Lafayette. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of crossover in the early history of this country with Freemasons playing a very influential role in importing Freemasonry into our Constitution, into the Capitol itself. Lots of Masonic symbols. The layout itself. What the gentleman's name? The layout, Lafayette, or starts with L. I'm sorry, but yeah, the layout of Washington itself is a Masonic symbol. So a lot of influence, a lot of import. Yes, on a dollar bill, a lot of our currency. You see a lot of. But again, I say again, Freemasonry, as far as symbols goes, nothing is new. It just borrows and repurposes.
Can the guest point out, this is Matthew Shadrix again, how one must remove even one's wedding ring for the first degree ceremony? Is that true?
Yeah, a lot of in the first degree, the inter-apprentice degree, it is a requirement that's loosely enforced. I don't like to, I don't every jurisdiction is different. It's kind of hard to say. That's why I tell Catholics, if you're going to a conversation with Freemasonry, don't even worry about it. Don't get stuck on a ritual, because Freemasons always have an easy out. They'll say, well, in my jurisdiction, that's not what we do. And the conversation is over. You lost. So, but in a lot of jurisdictions, the inter-apprentice is coming in from out of a darkness into light. So it is the whole, we see this in a lot of fraternal initiation rites, that this coming in from darkness into the light, this awakening, this awoke moment, right? And so part of this rebirth process for the initiate, the inter-apprentice, is that he has to leave all of the world outside the door. He has to strip himself down. And this is why he's in his underwear, this whole thing. And one of those things is, he can't bring any weapon into the lodge. Is ensured that he's not an assassin. And so, yeah, any metal and anything that comes from his old life can't come with him into this moment of rebirth.
Interesting. Another facsimile of Catholicism, another kind of aping of a sacrament. Sounds like a cultic version of baptism, in a way.
Yeah,
so you, so
that's exactly what the 3 degrees are. I think one of the strongest arguments that Freemasonry is a religion was one. Well, I said it in Anderson's Constitution. It calls itself a universal religion.
Mm-hmm.
but the second thing was that the 3 degrees of Freemasonry are sacraments for every essential purpose. What we think of a sacrament in this sense, that in the sense of religion, the first 3 degrees are sacraments of Freemasonry.
Interesting. A lot of people are asking about whether Catholics who are involved in Freemasonry or someone who is a Mason who wants to become a Catholic. Do you recommend just a good confession, or might deliverance prayers be in order and proper?
I know Father Rippinger. I know he's really big on these delivery prayers. You can find one online. It's so exhaustive and extensive. It's going through a lot of names you can't even pronounce. Maybe you might find a priest who can pronounce all these things. But I always stick to when I came in, when I became a Catholic, I had never been baptized. So for me, that suffice, the baptism, being cleansed of all my original sins. But, I stand by the sacraments of the church, making a good confession.
Yeah. Just definitely bring it up though.
Yeah.
You got to bring it up.
You got to bring it up.
Okay. Fair enough. Right. Same guy, Matthew says, 1517 Luther, 1717 founding of the Grand Lodge of England, 1917 Russian Revolution. Interesting.
And I talk about that. Yeah, I talk about that in the last chapter of my book. I talk about everything that's happened in 1917 in a crossover, and how Freemasonry and communism, how they play off each other. And I include a document in there as well from the church that explains the relationship between Freemasonry and communism. And clearly we see the relationship between Freemasonry and Protestantism, this indifferentism, this alternative ideas of salvation. So there's 1517, 1717, 1917. Some people like to throw in 2017 when Trump was elected, but I don't know.
Well, that was 2016. I thought you were going to say Pachamama. Pachamama in the Vatican.
Pachamama.
Well, that was actually 2018. Okay, we're just adjust my tiny tinfoil hat. Right. Next up, Michael Glowatsky says, some Masons I know are frequently knocking down the Catholic Church. I'm glad that I didn't join. Did you see much anti-Catholic bigotry in the lodges in your experience, David?
In my experience, I did not. The only thing I knew about Catholics was that the Catholic Church says that Catholics cannot be Freemasons, but from our perspective, they can be Freemasons. I never. Yeah, of all the people who I participated in bringing into the lodge through their initiations, never encountered a Catholic. So,
who started the Prince Hall division, if you will, the kind of the black subculture within Masonry? Because it sounds like was that because I've taught high school. And everyone listening in a Catholic high school setting knows what I'm about to say. In the cafeteria, the Filipinos sit with the Filipinos, the black kids they sit with black kids, the Jamaican black kids sit with them. You know what I mean? No matter what the racial ethnic background, people they feel more at home with people with whom they have a lot in common. Did that develop naturally, or was that a kind of subtle racist barge pole? You guys can be Masons, but you got to have it over here with your Prince Hall corner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some of that. Yeah, one of my favorite books is why do all the black kids sit together in the cafeteria? So yeah, it's kind of
really
that. Yeah,
that's funny.
But there's some of that. So Prince Hall, he was an abolitionist in the Boston area, and him and 14 other gentlemen were initiated into Freemasonry in an Irish lodge, an Irish military lodge that was there in Boston. So their first encounter with Freemasonry becoming Freemasons was, not them just starting this thing up, but they were initiated into an Irish lodge. The military left town. They left Prince Hall a warrant behind. A warrant gave them the permission to bury their dead sometime, and they were able to meet, march on St. John's Day. So as time go on, Prince Hall, he petitions what was that at that time called the Grand Lodge of England. This is 1776. He petitions the Grand Lodge of England, what it was called at that time. In 1813, they would change their name to the United Grand Lodge of England after some mergers. But yeah, so they petitioned the Grand Lodge of England for a charter. The Grand Lodge of England gives it to them, knowing full well that these are black men in America. There's no issues there with that. And so Prince Hall initially, he had tried to get into a mainstream or predominantly white lodge at that time. He was not allowed in America, just, the issues at that time.
Yeah.
And so, so from that point on, from the 1770s on, Freemasonry among black men and the Black Protestant Church, they grow up together. There's a lot of overlap between the two. They share the same building. Sometimes they share the same members. People like Richard Allen, who started the African American Episcopal Church. Prince Hall Freemasonry participates in the Underground Railroad. In its peak, Prince Hall Freemasonry United States had, approaching like a million members.
Wow.
So this continues on, this prejudice until like the late 1980s, early 1990s, when racism and segregation and prejudice is no longer the cool thing to do. So they start your mainstream lodges, as they're called, Grand Lodges, and your Prince Hall Lodge. They begin to start recognizing that each other exist, and they start, sharing meetings and start meeting with each other. And to this day, that's generally the case. Prince Hall Freemasonry is recognized as a regular Grand Lodge by most Masonic bodies. There's still some states like Mississippi where and even I think even Missouri, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure Missouri is another one of those where, Freemasonry has never dealt with its racist issues. It just never has. Even back, man, in like the 1800s, and this is why I want to bring this up real quick, because you touched on this before about some Freemasons bring up, oh, well, that's just, those European Masons. So Freemasonry, Freemason has these standards about who's regular and who's not regular, right? Who's clandestine, who's not clandestine, who has the right sacraments and who doesn't. And so you have really just two competing groups. You have what's called your Anglo Freemasons, which Prince Hall Freemasonry would now belong to. And then you have what are called Continental Freemasons. Your Continental Freemasons tend to go by, not by Grand Lodge, but by the term Grand Orient. So you have the Grand Orient of France and Grand Orient of Italy. And so we hear a lot about these. Pope Leo, he references these. But in Itzi Mota by Pius the Ninth, was it him? No, I think it was Benedict the 14th. I think they're one of the first popes that say that, no, it doesn't matter which Grand Lodge you belong to. All the Freemasonry is banned. It doesn't matter. So very early on in our history, we dealt with that whole, we don't care that Freemasons are competing with one another about who's in and who's not. And there is some differences in a third degree between your Continental and your Anglos, but even that doesn't matter because it's the principles of Freemasonry that are irreconcilable with the Catholic Church, not jurisdictions.
Gotcha. Two questions. Question one. The second one's a little more controversial. Number one, how many U.S. presidents have been Masons? Is that known?
Yeah, it's arguable.
Most, half, all?
Oh my gosh, it's under 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
because conspiracy theorists have a field day with this. Bill Clinton, George W, George Bush the senior, Skull and Bones. It's all kind of one big soup of covert secret societies, and they're hard to tease out and parse apart because they're by definition secretive. So it's hard to prove all this stuff. So you think less than 10% of U.S. presidents were Masons?
Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm trying trying to find it in my book, but I want to say this. The numbers, I think about 8. So there's Washington, there's Jefferson, um, Madison. I want to say everybody that's in that. What's that play that's out now?
I was going to say even Hamilton.
Yeah. Hamilton as well. All those guys that's in that play, they're all Freemasons.
They hit it though. They hit it.
Right.
Yeah. No songs about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Second question. Do you believe any?
Okay. So here it is.
Go ahead.
On top of the eight.
Eight. Okay.
8 of the first 25 presidents, United States were Freemasons. So that's on
But
that's on page 86. So we have George Washington, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, James K. Polk, James Buchanan, Andrew Jackson, James Garfield, and William McKinney. The others are also known to have been Freemasons include Roosevelt, Taft, Harding, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Harry S. Truman, and Gerald Ford.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Here's the controversial question from Nation member David Martinez. Have any popes been Masons?
What was
And not
Well,
former
for
Masons,
sure.
not former Masons, as we discussed with Leo XIII, but covert on the throne, but secretly Masonic.
Oh, not Freemasons, not made Freemasons in their youth. Okay.
No, correct.
No. I my research, I never discovered one pope who was an active Freemason. None on the in the propaganda lodge was started. Propaganda lodge that started in England always had your Catholics and prominent people in society who were Freemasons. A pope never showed up on any of those lists, never on Piccarelli's list or any of these lists. So I've never found anything of active Freemason.
Next, a week from Tuesday, I'm going to be interviewing Paul Kengor, who's a political science professor, wonderful biographer, and he has a book called The Devil and Karl Marx. And he marshals a really impressive array of evidence that points to the possible, he doesn't say it, I think it's more than probable that Karl Marx was possessed by a demon. And there's lots of evidence from his own writings, his poetry. He wrote a play, which very demonic. His daughters, 2 of his daughters, most of them died before he did. 2 of them died in a suicide pact with both of their husbands. Very strange stuff surrounding Karl Marx. And one of the things that he brings out in the book is that the documents of the Second Vatican Council removed and didn't even include the first schemas, the first drafts that started to be written in 1962. A lot of it was dropped altogether in what became the 4 main documents of the Second Vatican Council. And so what you see, if you read the documents themselves, I mean, forget the kooky spirit of Vatican II. The letter of Vatican II is almost silent on the evils of communism. And it made me wonder about communist infiltration in the church at that level, that they had some possible influence in the editing and the final publication of those docs. Of course, that got me thinking as I was reading through your book about Freemasonry making inroads into Catholic circles in a clandestine way. Now, again, it's hard to prove this, but is it an unreasonable thesis to think that Freemasons have a vested interest in getting inside and then rising as high as they can inside Catholicism, which is really, on the global stage, David, it's the biggest enemy of Freemasonry. The teachings against it are so clear. The Catholics can't be Masons, so there is a motivation there to send moles inside the Church of Rome, right? Am I overplaying the card here?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And the Freemasons have always, from the very beginning, Freemasons have always been in the Catholic Church, have always been, and we've never dealt with the issue. We've never had an Inquisition of Freemasons. We just never have. And we just never been able to get rid of them. Famous ones, unfamous ones. Talking about people like Haydn and Mozart. Freemasons. Pope Clement the 12th, his nephew, Neri. He seems to be, if he's not a Freemason, he's very defensive about Freemasonry. and so just from just from the very beginning, there's just always been this war. Initially, the war was this. And why there was great suspicion about Freemasonry, that Freemasonry was thought to be an English export, which it is. It comes from England. It's an English export. The problem with that was that at that time, England had it was ruled by the people. It had a parliament. This is a great threat to the monarchy rule. And so that's why there's this great suspicion about these Freemasons meeting in public. What are they talking about? And, at this time in history, there's always these plots of revolution and things like this that's going on. So that was the initial threat of Freemasonry. And, you look at Leo's documents, you look at, what was called Culture Kampf, which is, I don't know,
Culture
German word.
Yeah. It's where we get culture war. Culture war, yeah.
Yeah, culture war.
Or struggle, so Mein Kampf, same word, yeah.
And that was the issue. And they, the popes always blame Freemasons for that, whether... it's amazing that we hear this now. We hear about, the notion of separation of church and state. There was a time when the church thought that was ridiculous, right? Separation of church and state. But
it's not really, you can't really square that circle. It's not Catholic teaching. Anyway, that's another topic for another show. But so they were, go ahead.
When the popes are looking at things like the Freemasons promoting state taking over the school, state taking over marriage, they're always blaming Freemasons for that. So there's always this war between the Freemasons and the church about power and control and influence, like who has more influence over the state. The position that a lot of governments use Freemasons in a lodge for was to push against the influence of the Catholic Church. And that still goes on today. You still have Freemasons up and down the Catholic Church, and there's still this war to water down and weaken what the church teaches, even the liturgy. So
100%. Yeah, liturgy is really the heart of it, isn't it? I know you wrote a book about this. Divine Symphony?
Divine Symphony.
I will be paid handsomely for that reference, right? per our agreement.
And it was funny when I was writing this book, Patrick, because in this book, I'm coming down hard on Mozart. Shame on him. But in Divine Symphony, I'm talking about the brilliance of how he constructed the symphony orchestra, and how he learned that from the mass. So I bad people can sometimes
do awesome things, right?
Yeah.
Certifiable musical genius. That's true.
He was.
Now, I'm not the first person to notice this, but I wanted to throw this past you and get your take on it. I see a lot of similarities between Freemasonry and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Oh, yeah.
What are the sort of points of similarity in cobbling together sources from outside themselves?
Yeah. And it was in the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, this is not something they even deny. That Hiram Revels, I believe his name was Hiram, one of the principal founders of their church, was a Freemason. He was prior to him starting his religion, and so there's a lot of influence there in their initiation rites. The secrecy with what's going on in the temple. They even have call it a degree, call it a sacrament, whatever, called the Order of Melchizedek.
Yeah, Melchizedek
in the Mormons.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that's probably one of their most Masonic rituals. Call it. So a lot of influence, and that's something that they even deny. But what they will say was that they would just go with the law of coincidence. A lot of people wear white underwear underneath their clothes, that type of thing.
Funny you say underwear. That's what got me thinking about Mormonism. You thought you can just show up in your underwear. I thought, magic Mormon underwear. No offense to Mormons. But that, you can't bring your 9mm in your undies.
No weapon.
Deacon Patrick Lappert says, "Hey, what did I miss?" Well, go back and hit play from the beginning, Deacon. Great to have you, as always.
Hey, Deacon.
Someone points out that Bishop Athanasius Schneider, whom I've interviewed, has called Freemasonry the anti-church. That makes sense. Yeah. That's another connection with communism, which is another.
I think it was Leo the 13th, but I think he was the first person to call it the synagogue of Satan, which I think is the.
That's from Revelation too.
yeah. So that was the first time it kind of overlapped. So I think
Yep.
that's an awesome thing to call it.
Hmm. John Rovetto asks, would you say that the movie National Treasure was a Freemason version of the Da Vinci Code? Did you see National Treasure? With
No, I
Nicolas
didn't.
Cage, it's a national treasure.
No, I didn't.
No?
I did
Okay.
not.
Well, that was awkward. Okay. Deacon Patrick says, L'Enfant. I think that might have been a surname we were reaching for. L'Enfant. Maybe, Deacon, if you can explain what you mean by the word the infant in French there. Okay. Oh, Bob Sullivan points out the eye shows up in some Catholic art too. There's one in a Catholic church near me. Possibly, it's probably a different eye. I think the eye in Masonic imagery is not the iconic version of God's presence in Catholic art. I think that's the case. Do you know much about that, David?
Yeah, I mean, and I was, it's one of those things again. Does Freemasonry own the eye? I think
Right.
a lot of people, people were using the swastika long before the Ku Klux Klan got a hold of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yep.
Freemasonry just borrows and repurposes.
Lorraine Thibault says Mormonism, Little Joey, took much of their rituals from the Masons too. Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder what the rolled up trouser leg symbolizes. Bob Sukranth. What is that?
Oh, so he may have seen some of the
Is that more art?
a lot of old Masonic art. Yeah, it always
Mm.
shows a man in a black suit and his trouser legs rolled up. In I don't know. I don't. Well, okay, yeah, it would be that. So sometimes, if a person is being initiated, sometimes it is down to their boxer briefs or their tidy whities or whatever.
Fruits of the
But
loom.
sometimes, yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's just your pants leg rolled up. For women, for your women Freemasons, people don't know there's women Freemasons in co-Freemasonry. Of course, the women don't get down to their underwear. So the rolled up leg, will symbolize that same thing.
And they're kids groups, right? Demole, Daughters of the
Yes,
Eastern
yeah, you
Star.
have your
So it's a
demo
family.
leg, your
Yeah.
yeah, because you want to bring the women, the kids, everyone, the family that does occult things together stays together.
Stole.
Is that a thing?
You just made it a thing, sir. I know you don't talk about the Alta Vendita much in your book, kind of the field manual, but it's a good thing to read, as is your book. For folks who've just joined us, David L. Gray is former Mason leader, author of the Catholic Catechism on Masonry, very muscular subtitle, A Theological and Historical Treatment on the Catholic Church's Prohibition Against Freemasonry and Its Appendant Masonic Bodies. David, I feel like we've just begun to scratch the white of the eggshell here, or if it's a Costco organic egg, the brown shell of the egg. Always lots to talk about because it's a topic with wheels within wheels. But thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time today.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This is a live stream with me, Patrick Coffin, co-founder of Coffin Nation. We do this once a week inside Coffin Nation. Check it out. It's called Ask Away Thursdays. About once a month, we open the doors up to see the kind of exchange of ideas. We have a culture to take back. No one's going to take back our culture unless we do. This is especially true of disciples of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and the church that he founded, the only hope in a crazy topsy-turvy world, the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. David L. Gray, thanks for being a gift. Good to see you again.
Peace.
All right. This is the Patrick Coffin live stream. And as always, be a saint. What else is there?